With MSO News Sports, I'm Rick Moore, and really happy to be joined once again by State Senate Minority Leader Bruce Tarr. Senator Tarr, a longtime friend to the North Shore and in general, and to me in particular, among others. And Senator, welcome back. Nice to see you again.
Well, thanks, Rick. It's great to see you, and I want to congratulate you on the event that you recently did with all of the former mayors and the current mayor of Gloucester for the Gloucester 400 celebration. You did an outstanding job, and from what I hear, it was a great conversation that really gave people a lot of insight into the people that have run our city in Gloucester and their character and the things that they've had to go through. So congratulations.
Thank you. The Gloucester 400 Plus Committee that you have been involved with quite a bit put this thing together. Ruth Pino, one of the tri-chairs, organized this one, and it couldn't have been more informative and more enjoyable. The six mayors up there explain how the can was kicked down from one to the other, and whatever adversarial positions they may have had were left completely outside. It was a wonderful thing for an audience to see. And those six mayors spanned 35 years of Gloucester's history. So it was great to be part of it. Thank you. Senator, what's up for today?
Well, Rick, I've got some exciting and good news coming from Beacon Hill, and this relates to something that, as we've talked about in the past, I've been working on for the better part of the last 2 years, and that is major tax relief for people in Massachusetts. And Rick, this has been something that has traveled a long, difficult, curving path, but now it is finally on the governor's desk. And you may recall that Governor Baker, quite a while ago, actually began this initiative to try to deliver some major tax relief. I have offered it along with the Senate Republican caucus at every opportunity that we could get, whether that be in a budget or economic development bills. And Rick, I would point out that this has not been a partisan issue. Actually, we've worked to build bipartisan consensus. Governor Healy had filed a very similar bill to the one that Governor Baker filed. The House and Senate passed similar but not equal versions of this bill. And finally, Rick, with a vote of the House and the Senate last week, the Senate on Thursday, the House on Wednesday, with only one member in each branch voting no, passed the final version of the bill, which was a conference committee report that reconciled the House version with the Senate version. I was pleased to be a member of that six-person conference committee, and this bill is now on the governor's desk. And Rick, it will, in essence, if it is passed and signed into law, not passed, it's already been passed, but if it's signed into law as it was sent to the governor, it will deliver almost $1 billion in tax relief. Actually, a little bit more than $1 billion. It's about $1.02 billion altogether for people in Massachusetts over the next several years. It's phased in.
So what are some of the highlights of that?
Well, I'm pleased to tell you this, and you'll remember a lot of these categories, Rick, because we've talked about a lot of them in the past on your show. One of the things that we've talked about an awful lot is the Massachusetts estate tax. As you know, right now, estates under $1 million are not taxable in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That makes us an outlier. Many states don't even have an estate tax, and among those that do, the threshold is much higher than $1 million. So this bill doubles the threshold to $2 million and provides a tax credit so that there's no cliff effect. So everything up to $2 million would be effectively exempt, which is really important for a lot of folks, particularly given the fact that the value of a home right now in Massachusetts, the average price is somewhere in the vicinity of $600,000. So people's homes alone put them close to being over that $1 million. So that was very important.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry, I did see recently that the median house price of a house on the North Shore is $650, and the median price of a house up for sale in Marblehead, for example, is $950. So it wouldn't take a whole lot to get to that 1 million threshold.
Definitely not. And that's assuming that you don't have any other assets, which of course most people do. So this is a major advancement. The governor had actually supported going to $3 million. I would support that as well. And I hope that we revisit this in the future if the law is passed as written to increase from 2 to, I would say, $5 million and maybe indexed to inflation. But the point is that this bill doubles the current threshold, and that's incredibly important. And speaking of the cost of housing, one of the other things that the bill does is effectively double the senior citizen circuit breaker tax program. And you'll recall, this is the program that helps seniors with the cost of municipal taxes. And there are some criteria, they're fairly simple, but it allows them to get a refundable tax credit. So even if a senior doesn't have any tax liability, if they file a tax return based on this tax credit, they get a check back. And right now, the maximum amount of the credit is $1,200. This tax credit doubles in the bill that we sent to the governor to $2,400, and that's extremely significant.
Senator, as a former math teacher, I'm seeing a lot of subtraction. How does that reconcile with the state budget in terms of addition, in terms of income?
You know, Rick, we've been doing very well over the last several years with regard to our revenue. We feel that we can easily support this. Obviously, things have tightened up in the last year or so, and I would suggest that we are not likely in the next few years to see the kind of surpluses that we saw just 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but we're still doing well. We're still on a pace to be able to balance the budget, to be able to meet our financial priorities. And I would make an important point here, Rick, that state government should not only be concerned with spending money, it should be concerned with helping the people that pay the bills have strong household budgets so that they can weather a financial storm if one happens, either individually or collectively in our economy. And so it's important that we think about spending on important things, but also making sure that folks can get the kind of tax relief they need so that they themselves can be financially secure. So the short answer to the question is we think that this can be easily covered by the revenue that we have and that we'll foreseeably collect. And again, Rick, there are many other parts to this bill. One that I particularly want to mention, two that I want to mention is the rental deduction, which in Massachusetts is currently at $3,000 a year. This bill would increase it to $4,000 a year. You and I have talked a lot about the cost of housing on Cape Ann and throughout Massachusetts. And we know that it's very difficult even to find a one-bedroom apartment for less than $2,000. So this tax credit is extremely meaningful in trying to provide some quantum of relief in increasing the deduction by $1,000. In addition to that, Rick, one of the important things that we haven't talked about a lot is the single sales factor. And this is something that Representative Ferranti and I have worked hard on in our respective chambers because it's so important to the competitiveness of our economy. So right now, with the exception of just a couple of industries, financial services and defense contractors, Massachusetts taxes are levied against our employers based on their sales, their payroll, and their investment in physical plant. Well, you can see right away that, particularly as a math teacher, Rick, that if you invest in payroll, if you invest in people, and if you invest in physical plant, the current sales tax formula penalizes you for that. And so with this bill, we go to the single sales factor for everyone. So we tax you on sales, we tax you on revenue. We don't tax you on the investments that you're making in people and equipment and physical plant. That's one, again, Rick, that hasn't been talked about a lot, but will make a big difference for our employers, particularly as they compete with employers located in other states.
Sounds like good news across the board. Anything else on that particular package you want to mention?
So just a couple of other quick things, Rick, and you know that I rarely use notes, but I'm using them today because I want to make sure that I get the specifics of these things right. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that's been very important to me as we pursued this bill is the child and dependent tax credit. This is for folks that have children at home or have a dependent at home, maybe someone with a disability that's a dependent. And right now, the tax credit is $180. What this bill does is go to $310 for tax year 2023, and then to $440 every year after that. So that's a significant change. And also, Rick, right now there's a cap on the number of dependents you can claim with this credit. The bill removes that cap.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So, as you mentioned, there are things here that spread across the spectrum of folks in Massachusetts that need and deserve our help. And the last one that I'll mention, the last category, is the earned income tax credit, which is for low-wage earners. And the federal government has an earned income tax credit. It can also provide you, as my understanding, with a refund as well. Massachusetts currently allows you to take up to 30% of the federal credit. This bill will now allow you to go to 40% of the federal tax credit. So all across the spectrum, this bill is very, very important. And again, Rick, just one more category, short-term capital gains. We currently tax it at 12%, which discourages investment. This bill takes it to 8.5%. Not the 5% that we wanted, but compromise is important in moving things forward. And that's where I'll close on this subject, saying that unlike what we're seeing in Washington right now, where we've almost had the shutdown of the federal government, and we could have a potential shutdown again in 45 days, in Massachusetts, both parties got together. Both parties found a way to get compromise. I don't love every part of this bill, but I like a lot of it, and it's going to deliver meaningful tax relief that we've been pursuing for years, Rick. And the only reason it's happening is because we got bipartisan consensus to move forward.
I was taught that politics is the delicate art of compromise, and it seems as though Massachusetts legislature is a good example of that. And Senator, before I let you go, can I ask you about the machinations of this entire project in terms of the relationships? Because you're always talking about relationships, and it sounds to me like not only are you a tireless worker, but there are others in the legislature as well who want to help as you do.
There's no doubt about it, Rick, and I say this oftentimes, that one of the most important things in public life is relationships. And these are serious topics in this tax bill. They're sensitive, they're important. People like me feel very passionately about them. And relationships played a large role in getting us over the goal line. My good friend, the Senate Chair of the Committee on Ways and Means, Mike Rodericks from Westport, on the other side of the aisle, but he and I worked together constantly over the past several months, including up to the very last minutes of getting this bill passed. And I think it's a good example of how you have to have the relationships to be able to rise above your differences. And certainly he and I had some differences on this bill. That's no secret. And others on the conference committee did as well. But ultimately, if we held on to those differences and we let them paralyze us, we would not have $1 billion in tax relief for people in Massachusetts. But we were able to rise above that because we respect each other, we value the perspective that other people bring, and we all understood that the most important thing was reaching our common goal. And that's exactly what we did in this bill. I won't tell you that there weren't tense moments in these discussions. As you know, they happened behind closed doors. I won't tell you that it was easy, but I will tell you those relationships are what got us to where we are today.
Well, it's because it was hard that it makes it so much more important that it got done. That's great to hear. All right, Senator, a couple of quick things. What's next for the bill, and then what's coming up for you in the near future?
So the bill is actually on the governor's desk, and she's going to have 10 days because it's not a spending bill, Rick, although that sounds a little bit hard to understand because it cuts taxes, but it's technically not a spending bill. So the governor doesn't have a line item veto. If she wants to have options here, she can veto the whole bill, or she can send it back with amendments. And there are a couple of pieces here that may be amendable. And one of them has to do with requiring someone who files a joint tax return federally to file a joint tax return at the state level. Right now, you can file individually or jointly, despite how you file federally. So that's a very controversial subject because when the so-called millionaires tax was passed, its proponents said that it would affect individuals. And so to now change the rules and say, okay, no matter how you file federally, or if you file jointly, you have to file jointly, in Massachusetts really expands the reach of that tax. So that's a bit of a controversial item. The second piece relates to Chapter 62F, which was passed by the voters overwhelmingly in 1986, which dictates that when there is a tax rebate, it goes out proportionately according to the amount of taxes that you paid. This bill changes that and creates the same rebate amount for everyone. I personally don't like that. It is not in the question that was approved by the voters. So that's a second piece that the governor I know is looking at and that I've asked her to look at. So the governor has 10 days. We'll see what happens next. And then for the legislature, Rick, we're going to take up vetoes for the current fiscal year's budget that the governor made when she signed that budget into law. That'll be happening on Thursday for us. The House did it last week. And I suspect that many of those vetoes will be overridden. But as always with the legislature, you never know until the vote is taken.